Hey folks, David Stewart here. Where has all the talent in Hollywood gone as far as writing goes? This was a question on a recent review. Why has writing gotten so much worse in Hollywood? Now, I answered this question like 8 or even 9 years ago, more than 8 years ago, I think. And the answer's more or less the same, which is that it doesn't matter. A good story is not a requirement to have a successful movie. It's not a necessary condition. And because it's not a necessary condition, that's going to distort almost everything around it. Now, I would like to add a little bit to that answer that I gave like 8 years ago, where I think I said just plot doesn't matter anymore, because I think there's some other things at play as to why plot doesn't really matter anymore. The why, I think, is pretty important to think about, as well as just the fact that it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a really well-written story, good dialogue. You don't even have to have plot points that make sense in order to have a successful movie. Disney Star Wars proves that. People are willing to go and buy tickets to whatever the newest Disney Star Wars movie is. Even if they hate it, they'll still buy tickets and watch it. Even if they haven't enjoyed a Star Wars show or movie in years, they'll still subscribe to Disney Plus and watch whatever the current Star Wars series is. They will watch Star Wars until the end of time. So that's part of the why, actually, when we get a little bit deeper, but that's the big result. So you can hire whoever you want to write. Writing jobs tend to be really, really low paying in Hollywood. It's like the smallest part of a production budget is the writing. Even if you're hiring a blockbuster writer and you're paying him $100,000 for a script, it's a gigantic, huge, expensive movie, and the writing is still a tiny portion of the budget. For a lot of shows, the writing rooms, they pay, not anywhere close to a living wage in Los Angeles, that's for sure. Last I checked, it was like $24,000. That's not going to get you very far in LA. You'll still be waiting tables, or you better be having multiple jobs every year. It just doesn't really pay very well to be a writer. You're not attracting really good talent. You don't need to, because it just doesn't matter. People are going to go to the movies anyway. They're going to buy the movies. They're going to do the streaming anyway. So why is that the case? Why are people really willing to just watch garbage year after year? I think there's a couple reasons. First of all, they're habituated into doing it. At this point, people are really habituated into watching whatever's on Netflix or whatever's on HBO. And particularly with franchises like Star Wars, the sea of alternatives is so murky to most consumers. They'd rather watch schlock that they don't enjoy for an hour than take a chance on something else that they might really not enjoy. So they'll watch the bad Star Wars show because they're still hoping that it'll be good, and they know that there's been something good in it in the past. Same thing with Game of Thrones, or like the House of the Dragon or something like that. Is that they liked some part of that original IP enough to just continue watching it. And they're going to do that until there's enough social hype around something else that they're willing to watch something else, and then maybe let that other thing go by the wayside. And there just hasn't been one, right? Hollywood has not produced a new breakout hit that I can think of in quite a few years. The last big cultural phenomenon I remember is like Game of Thrones, maybe, to be like a new thing that people hadn't seen before, wasn't based on a previously existing franchise. I think it might have been Game of Thrones, and so that's quite old at this point. We're like more than 10 years out of that. So yeah, people are just consuming whatever's in front of them. They're habituated to it. The other thing is there's been a decline in going to the movies. Going to the cinema used to be something that people would just do all the time. And they used to vet all the movies that they would watch at the cinema pretty moderately. They would watch, Siskel and Ebert. They'd read the reviews in the movie theater, or in the newspaper, to decide what they were going to do at the movie theater that weekend. They'd go to church and then maybe go to the movie, or they go to the movie on the Saturday afternoon. I knew that I used to go at least once a week. I'd go on Fridays, and I'd see whatever movie looked interesting for that new hit, or whatever my friends wanted to see. People saw a lot of movies in the theater, is the big point. And so you could have more diversity in that theater. You weren't really looking to capture 100% of the viewing market in any given month, and you weren't needing to do that in order to pay down gigantic overbloated budgets. There was a lot more reasonably priced movies. There was a lot of comedies that would make money, that would come to theaters and everybody would watch. I haven't seen too many comedies lately that have been at all kind of breaking out and making waves or getting people to want to go to the theater and watch it. Something like The Hangover. I haven't seen any movies like that recently that people have been talking about. It's just been, it's all been pretty mild. And I think there's been fewer movies coming out. I go to the movie theater and half of the theaters are showing one movie and the others are showing, movies from a couple weeks ago that maybe a couple people are still interested in seeing. It's always like whatever's the newest thing that's coming out. So that decline in the movie going experience from something that people used to actively engage in all the time to something that is just a really occasional expense, and that might go with the down, the sort of the downward slope of the economy since 2020. I think the pandemic didn't help. All of these things hurt the Hollywood model. And you have to think that anytime you're producing a movie, you're taking a big risk. You're taking a risk with your money. You have to put a lot of money in the front end to make a movie, and you have to hope that you're going to make money on the back end. And so the worse the guarantee of return gets because of the habits of the consumer, the more you're going to go with the things that are guaranteed. And the things that tend to be guaranteed are actually not small budget movies, but big budget movies, special effects extravaganzas, because those are ones that people will go see no matter how bad the writing is. And because they'll go see no matter how bad the writing is, you end up in this kind of feedback loop of like, you just don't even bother trying to write a really good movie. And to me, there's kind of an irony there, because a lot of the big blockbusters of maybe 15 or 20 years ago were pretty well written. I think they were successful because of their stories. Even something like Pirates of the Caribbean, which I should do like a 20th anniversary review of the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. It really nails its plot. It's got great characters. It has a lot of comedic moments. It goes through all its paces and executes them really well. And I just can't really expect that of a new movie without some kind of thick layer of irony covering the entire production, which is what we get towards the later phases of the MCU. Is everything's looking through an ironic lens. Maybe audiences like that, I can't say for sure, but it seems like just the general participation in the cinema has really fallen off over the last decade, and especially since 2020, which is going to change how you're going to produce movies and how you're going to produce shows. If you produce a show for a streaming service, you don't have to make money on that show specifically. It's part of the value add for the entire service. So people will subscribe to HBO because it has lots of shows on it that they want to watch. And so when you make a new show, that's adding to that value. There's another good show to watch on HBO Max. Or they just want to call it Max now, which is really stupid. Why would you throw away your great branding that you've had for 40 years or whatever to just try to call something Max and get it confused with, a cycling 74 piece of software and a computer? Just call it HBO Max. Anyway, that's a value add. Same thing with Netflix. Is if it's on Netflix, that's a value add. People will want to keep their subscription. People will want to come back to their subscription in order to watch more shows that they like. Whereas if you were just broadcasting it, the ratings matter because that determines how much advertising money you get to make that show. So if you're making a Star Trek show on Paramount or CBS or something, and no one's watching it, right? The Nielsen ratings are really low, like it's back in the 90s. Why do you cancel it? It's because you can't get enough advertisers, and you can't charge those advertisers enough money to pay for the expenses of the show. There's a lot more exact feedback to what gets canceled and what gets left on the air. Meanwhile, you have something like Rings of Power, which is just almost like a money laundering operation. They just flush money down the toilet making something that's garbage that people don't really want to watch. If they had made it on a major network, it would have been a total loss. They would have canceled it right away because people, the viewership would have dropped off so quickly you couldn't generate any kind of advertising revenue. So streaming has a lot to do with it. So streaming has really harmed the cinema, and it's also changed and obscured the feedback mechanisms that you usually use to determine whether a show is good or bad. Shows when you didn't have big budgets for like special effects really had to be carried by their writing. I think the strength of the original Star Trek series is in its writing, and it had great writers like Harlan Ellison working on the show. It's why it's really stood the test of time, and there's so many great original series Star Trek episodes. It's because the writing is really good. You didn't have a bunch of CGI, you didn't have a bunch of special effects, and you had a really low budget to work with. So the writing really had to carry the day. You had to have great stories. And I think that was the case all the way up until today, where eventually you end up with these high budget series is trying to be kind of Game of Thrones, forgetting that Game of Thrones was based on a series of really big hit books by George R.R. Martin that were already well written enough to make everybody like them, right? They're well written, so you're starting with something that's good. And in fact, from what I've gathered, because I don't really enjoy the show, it's not for me, but people who loved it were like, that 8th season, it like drops off bad because George R.R. Martin didn't write it. They weren't working from a book that a good writer wrote. They were writing it themselves, and what do you know? It sucks. I could have predicted it, and I may have at one point, but anyway, that's something that I noticed with that. So keeping all of those market factors in mind, where's the writing talent in Hollywood? Well, it's not in Hollywood, right? You're not going to make money there. You're not going to get a job there because you don't have connections or you're the wrong race or something like that. Quality just is not emphasized. The good writers are going to be somewhere else doing something else, maybe not even writing, because there may be no money in writing. There may be more money in performing surgeries. Michael Crichton may never have quit being a doctor if he had been born several decades later, right? It just wouldn't be worth it to write books. That's a possibility as well. So we're just not seeing good writers because there's very little financial incentive to be great in that craft, and especially not in Hollywood. So that's my answer. It doesn't matter. It's not essential. It's not a necessary condition for success. And to the extent that it creates success, I don't believe it's a sufficient condition. I think things that are really well written don't automatically become a big hit. So that's the other thing too, is that the race is not to the swift nor the battle to the strong. I think that's true with writing as well. Great books just language in obscurity, while bad books get a lot of sales. Same thing happens with poorly written movies and really well written movies. One may just bomb even though it's good, and one may do really well even though it's bad. It's just not a necessary, the necessary and sufficient conditions don't line up to make it. So if you write a really good movie, you're going to have success, and if you write a bad movie, you won't have. You can still be successful with a poorly written movie. And there's just too many examples to pull out. Just think of whatever your favorite big blockbuster that you think sucks is. Chances are there's 20 or 30 more movies just like that were released that fall into that same category of well-executed garbage, right? It looks nice, or very pretty garbage. It's pretty but terribly written. So anyway, leave me your thoughts down below. I'd love to know more of what people think about this particular phenomenon. My consumption of Hollywood media has also dropped off a lot. So keep in mind that my sample size kind of shrinks over time because I just have watched so many bad or formulaic or boring movies that I'm just not super excited to see them. Even movies that I would rate at a C, I'm not excited to go watch a bunch of C level movies. I want to see A+ movies. And I haven't seen a whole lot of A+ movies out of Hollywood. Godzilla Minus One was really good, and it was good because the writing was good, not because the special effects were good. Yet it wins the special effects Oscar. So, I don't know. Square that circle. Let me know what you think. I'll see you guys next time. Don't forget you can join my Patreon. You get a free book every month down below, patreon.com/DavidVStewart. And you will also get access to all of my live writes. I write books live on the air on this channel, and so you get the copies of those if you don't want to. You can watch the stream and watch them being created live, or you can read them after the fact, or do both if you want. So that's also a benefit, and everybody gets, depending on the membership tier, you'll get access to Keys to Prolific Creativity, my creativity manual for how to be very productive as a creative individual, whether you're a musician or a writer or something else like that. I've learned through a lot of experience. I have a very busy life with a family, and I'm able to produce a lot of things, including books. You can see a whole bunch of books that I wrote behind me. Those are all mine. And albums and things like that. And don't forget to subscribe to my music channel down below too if you want some ambient guitar kind of stuff. So take it easy, and I'll see you all next time.